In Splatoon 3, Undercover Brella is in a really unfortunate state. In fact, by competitive players, it is almost unanimously agreed to be the worst weapon in the game currently. Now, there's a list of reasons for this, and of this list that is, well, salvageable, some very obvious ones that aren't going to be fixable right away are the awful kit it has, Inkmine not at all aiding what it wants to do, and Reslider having some problems right now, being basically considered a suicide button. The main weapon basically having a hole in the shield that, while hard to purposely hit if you're against one, the fact that that can just happen to you is really awkward. Its shield being very frail, and probably the biggest thing that hurts it, the servers being not as good as they were in Splatoon 2. What this means is that the game will sometimes not recognize that your shield is open on the other person's side, even though on your side it's already opened. But what if I told you this wasn't a downside for Undercover? At least, not as much as one would think. As far as the developers are concerned, this server-related issue is really bad for the entire Brella class, and it's the reason why the Brella class as a whole is doing really bad right now, minus the fact that for some weird reason, there's just a hole in the shield. I don't know why, and this video is not going to cover how to fix that, because there's no way to fix it right now. Instead, we're going to be covering a funny little exploits. We're going to take something that normally is Undercover's worst weakness, the latency of the server currently, and turn it into the most horrifically terrifying thing possible. Something so ridiculous that it leaves your opponents incapable of fighting back once you start it. Let's show the clip. Alright, so over here on Twitter, I posted a clip that, if you follow me, you've probably seen because it's starting to gain a bit of traction. Let's just play it real quick, you know, nothing strange is gonna happen. It's Undercover, right? Alright. If you didn't see it, I'll explain to you what happened right after we cover Para's perspective, the person who did testing with me and a very avid Undercover enjoyer. Someone who really wanted to play it in this game, and even though they love the weapon to death, its lack of viability, even on a casual level, has led him to not play it as much. However, this is what it looked like on Para's end. Notice how Para never got hit afterwards. And also notice how Para wasn't in the same spot as he was on my screen. Let's scroll back a bit. Para was on my side of the shield. So what happened? Why is this occurring? And how can you use it in the meantime? Well, before we go over how practical this is, because we're going to cover that, let's talk about what's happening here. Now, there's a lot better setups into this, and we're going to talk about setups into this trick later, because the most important thing isn't the fact that it's possible, but how in the world do you set this up? Well, starting off, you want to hit your opponent in such a way where, well, actually, the very first thing you need to do before you even start it, have your shield backing up into them. And keep note of what side they are on. If they are on the right side, like you see here, then make sure that you're, ready to turn to the right. And if they're on the left side, get ready to turn to the left. This is because, if we move here, notice how Para's Inkling is trying to fix its position. The server is struggling to move Para to where they should be. Because, as far as the server is concerned, on your screen, the other Inkling has not been fixed in their position. But on their screen, as we showed before, right about here, it immediately moved. What this means is that, well, the bomb that occurs is on the other side. The shots that occur are on the other side. You basically want to aim so that the handle of the Brella shield is directly between the Inkling. You're basically stabbing them with the pole. This is the easiest way to guarantee that they're stuck in the combo long enough for it to matter. We're also backing up because the game is really trying to pull them back into the spot they're supposed to be on your screen and does not feel like just teleporting them. At least not right away. It teleports them back to their appropriate position once they die because, well, there's no physical thing stopping it from doing so anymore. On top of this, let's talk about how the damage is actually being dealt, because this is pretty important. The reason I actually titled this as 3 times faster kill time, first hit is the shield being pulled. Second hit, shield being pulled. Third hit, the shot. And then the 4th and 5th hit, I didn't time the pauses right, but they happened before that. This is a 5-hit combo where one shot happens and it's 4 Brella bumps, right? It's 4 Brella bumps into the shield. And if you don't believe me, because the clip, I fired off extra shots before, I also, number 1, messed this up already in how I was doing it. And 2, well, yeah. There were other clips I had that I could have shown off as well, but I wanted to show off this one in particular. Because notice how my shield is only breaking once Para dies. This video is not clickbait. I didn't just say Undercover breaks the game because this trick is broken. I mean, by the literal stance, Undercover breaks this game. I want you to look at this clip and when the Brella shield is hit here. Now let's just go back here for a second. There were a few other tests done with the main weapon, but there weren't any easier way to show this off. The shield is basically invincible. And I say basically because it's not actually invincible. What's happening here is that the game doesn't know what to do, and it's waiting until the Inkling is back in a proper position to fire, or, well, whatever's being thrown. What this means is that if you're doing it properly, the shield is basically invincible to that player until the grab is done. So yes, as far as you need to know, if you pull it off, it's a kill. Everything from that point on is all on you. I'd also like to mention, because the server is desynced at that moment, it doesn't matter if your opponent moves. It doesn't matter what your opponent does. The game is still trying to fix your position anyways. It's not going to change what they do. And in case you're wondering, oh, what if they tried to go behind you? There's not enough time. By the amount of the Brella pushes, if you do if you do either the version shown in this clip or like the proper version of it, which is nearly instant, you basically just don't give them enough time to get behind you, which, I mean, I don't know what happens if they get behind you. And I don't think getting behind you would matter much because you're still desynced, which means the game is still trying to figure out where to place you. So, now that we've kind of acknowledged the fact that Undercover has casually the most game-breaking glitch in the literal sense, how game-breaking in the viable sense is this? Well, if it wasn't obvious, this isn't the most powerful trick in the universe. It's not because the trick itself is inconsistent, which it is very consistent so long as you do the right movements. And it can take a lot of practice to get used to being able to hold your opponents behind your shield, because they squirm a lot. The game is actively fighting to release them, and you have to move your shield at just the right spot or else they will be set free. Though, the big issue with this comes in a very, very obvious way once you attempt to do it in an actual match against an opponent who does not want to go down. Number one, you cannot do this moving towards an opponent because your shield will just stop you. Secondly, the opponent has to be able to move, as if your opponent cannot receive knockback. Well, this happens. And in fact, the reason why this was discovered was because we were trying to practice another setup for Undercover, which is that. That setup is nice and still probably more practical than the exploit we're going to be showing off here, unless someone optimizes the way to set it up, but yeah. And probably the most obvious and biggest downside to this trick that I'm going to be covering third, because I feel like it's something you either are aware of or are going to get the sad realization of the moment you go for it. It's not exactly easy to get behind your opponent. Like, the setup requires you to have your shield open behind them and move back into them. For obvious reasons, it is kind of difficult to grab an opponent that way. They're not actively going to want you to get hit by this, and even if they don't know what you're going for, it's gonna probably result in your opponent trying to run away, because why would they do that? So there are some setups to help you get into position more easily, and some gear that I would recommend if you want to go for this. However, I do want to note, however, that as of now, this trick's viability is very low. This is because Undercover's probably one of the weaknesses that isn't just bugs, where the weapon itself is pretty poorly programmed, where its shield just won't work sometimes, is the fact that it can struggle to get into position to do its normal job, meaning it's going to struggle to get into position behind somebody and then walk back into them. Also, in case you're wondering why it's not working against training dummies, they do not receive knockback. Same thing applies to these shields, and ironically, they push, well, what happens when your shield tends to get bumped anyways. So, for people wanting to use this against an actual human being who's attempting to not die to you, how would you do this? Well, to put it simply, there's two methods I would recommend. First up is what I'm going to call, I'm not going to call anything, I'm just going to say what it is. Just squid roll behind them and back up. Having some run speed can help you with the end part of the setup, because that's kind of going to be the hardest part, because, well, when you're here, unless they're just standing still, it's you need to get the hit very quickly, because they can still move, keep that in mind. A lot of swim speed can help, but if they see your ripples, it's likely going to be a sign that, oh, someone's running up to me, I should take them out. It doesn't matter if they know you're going for the exploit, anybody running at you is a danger sign. So, to relegate this, Ninja Squid. While it does still leave a trail behind you that you can kind of see, the fact that this can buy you an opening at all is a lot more than what any other ability offers. On top of this, within the chaos of a match, it's not likely that your opponent's always going to notice you. So long as you aren't being blatantly obvious, and you're doing your best to remain stealthy, Ninja Squid can help a lot get into position, and from there, just do the setup, and they're done for. I also do want to say, if you're going to do this, I'd highly recommend practicing this in a private battle with somebody before attempting this against a real person, because even learning to do it in the first place is pretty difficult. And we actually found this by accident, because, you know, you don't just try these things until you accidentally see someone teleporting and you want to test it out more, because, yeah. Though, I do also want to mention another thing to note. I don't know how the devs are going to handle this. How is the server going to respond to you doing this? I don't know. So if you're going to do this in a public lobby, be ready for whatever happens. Because as far as I'm concerned, you're actively doing a glitch that affects the server's connection. And I have no idea how it would respond. And I personally do not feel like messing with the server. At least in a public lobby. Next up, another gear perk I would recommend, other than Ninja Squid, is run speed, because if you haven't noticed, we're backing up by running. That's as far as we're gonna go gear-wise. And yeah, well, we're just gonna end the video off here. I'm not gonna make this any longer. I wanna just get it out before, you know, it gets patched out, because something tells me this isn't gonna stay in the game forever. And even if it does stay in the game forever, it has some problems. Unless Undercover for some reason gets a kit that allows it to get close to you, in which case, dear lord, this is gonna go from like a useless technique to you have to actively think about it. And while it can help you go for picks a lot faster, it does have the downside of it's annoyingly difficult to start setup. Maybe it can be maybe the setup can be optimized a lot more and all that kind of stuff, but until then, the tech is more a funny thing that exists that can be done if you miraculously pull off the situation. And there's gonna probably be like one person who tries to make a video on I try to do this funny tech on people, which, by the way, I gotta name this thing. So what are we calling it? Well, I was suggested by Para to call it grappling. The combo is basically a grab. However, I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna explain the name and I'm gonna explain my reasoning. I'm going to be calling it UnderCuddles. Basically a pun on undercover and the idea of cuddling because it's funnier to me. On top of this, if this ever becomes a bigger exploit, I want to see a bunch of people freaking out and saying they're scared of cuddles, which would be funny. And that's my motivation behind calling it UnderCuddles. Because people are going to shorten it to Cuddles, and you can kind of get where I'm going with this. Anyways, that'll be it though for now. Who knows, maybe more people will discover what's going on with this trick and find more value in it, but for now, I'm just here to share this with the world. I'm not responsible for whatever people decide to do with this next. You have fun breaking the servers as far as you want. Maybe this will even encourage Nintendo to improve their servers, and if there's some Nintendo dev watching this to try and figure out how to patch it out, hey, how you doing? Great game. Please improve your servers a little. But yeah, anyways, thank y'all for watching. I'm gonna stop stalling. See you guys next time.